somebody asked me if there was an equation for grace yesterday. So I was like, I don't know. I mean, that's
Great
kind of
question. I like that question.
Right. What's the equation for grace? And you know, I thought, well, it probably has something to do with the golden rule, right? And the golden rule is do unto others, right? And what I wrote back to him, and I said, look, this is just straight off of just pure intuition. I have no idea if there's any, sort of scientific basis for this, but the equation I would write for grace would probably be phi minus 1 is equal to 1 over phi.
Yeah, I was going to say 1 plus or minus square root of 5 over 2, which is
well, there you go. That's phi, right?
Equation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So effectively, it's the same thing what you just said, and so I wrote that back to him. I'm like, that's just my intuition telling me, I don't know. You asked for it. I'm not going to give you any substantiation behind it, but it felt right.
Well, yeah, the golden ratio is a kind of the most graceful, the most beautiful of harmony. And so, yeah, I resonate with that, with what you're saying there.
And I also resonate, Robert, when you say, I'm just speaking from my intuition, and I can't validate this, but it just feels right. Just exactly what you said there. That's, I think, one of the most potent things about sacred geometry for me. And I suppose a lot of my work is, one, trying to get myself into that space where I can open to those intuitions and allow them come true, but then also encourage as best I can others to trust that side of themselves, to trust that there's an intelligence that we can access when we journey inward, towards the source of who we are at the deepest level. There's a weird paradox happens. It's like the more we journey inward and we truly connect with who we are, somehow by doing that, when we emerge back out into the world, we feel much more connected, much more joined up, much less separate, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why that's the case, but I've experienced this over and over again, and I've witnessed it in others, and I just think it's the most remarkable thing. And I think geometry is very helpful for giving us access to those deeper spaces inside ourselves, the true, the kind of, excuse my French, but the no bullshit part of who we are, beyond the conditioning of our culture,
no masks.
It lets us, and so you become the real you, somehow. And I sense, my feeling is that your journey has had that component to it, and now forgive me, that might be just Geoff's projection.
No, you're exactly right.
I picked that up from you,
You nailed it for sure, because for me, it was about getting in touch with my heart and the things I love, which are always difficult for me to talk about. Because I've had such an amazing life. I have to say, when COVID started, I remember, I just got back from Egypt, and Nassim and I got in an argument, and he's like, you're going to go to Egypt and you're all going to get stuck in Egypt. And there's going to be, and I was like, look, we've already planned this trip for months and months. I said, I have it on pretty good authority. We're going to make it back before the borders close. And we did. We literally made it back one day before the borders closed. So we'd have been stuck in Egypt probably for 2 or 3 months had we not, and all the sites would have been closed. Imagine being in Egypt and all the sites being closed. They were literally washing the pyramid to get the COVID off. It's like,
oh my God,
this was like insanity, but we made it back just in time. And I remember, we all had a feeling that this was going to happen right when we got back. And of course, it was in straight lockdown when we got back. This is early March of 2020. And I'll say this, that for me, it was like a mourning period. And that's why I did philosophical geometry, because it was a way to kind of deal with my own grief. And it wasn't, of course, everyone was mourning the loss of loved ones and everything that was going on with that. But I felt like the world that I had grown up in was now dying. It was done. And I had to look forward to the new transition. And, I didn't grow up in a bad place. I grew up in a happy family. I had a wonderful life. I've been successful in the matrix, as it were, right? And so there are lots of aspects of it that I really enjoyed and had fun with. But I had to mourn the death of that world, the the structure of even government and, you know, things working properly, and, you know, sort of like believing the blue pill is actually just the way to go. It's like the scene in The Matrix where, you know, he's eating the steak. He's like, I know this isn't real, but it tastes so good. Type of thing.
Cypher, yeah,
Cypher,
yes.
right?
It's
Cypher, what a great
scene.
name.
Yeah.
Cypher for a cryptographer.
Well, and
Yeah.
there's a tendency in that blue pill world to be satisfied with the steak and be satisfied with all the benefits that you achieve through through your work there. And I'm really amazed that that wasn't enough for you, and there was something in your soul that was calling you on into deeper levels of pattern recognition and understanding that drew you kind of more towards what I would call the red pill world. And I know that that's not an easy journey, because like I've taken that journey and I show like Secrets in Plain Sight to people, and it's kind of polarizing, because some people like have no comment and they don't want to talk to me anymore. I'm just like, what happened? And then other people watch it 20 times literally, and they love every bit of it and they can't get enough. And what I found is it's kind of like fruitless to try to force that on someone. Mm-hmm. They need to come to it on their own. Mm-hmm. When they're
yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I think that's been the thing that I couldn't deny, is that I came to it all on my own. Mm-hmm. Nobody like convinced me. It wasn't like I was, you know, I went away to like that show on Netflix, Wild Country, where they've got like Osho out in the middle of Oregon somewhere, you know, and
I love great documentary, crazy as it could get.
No, yeah. I certainly had no experiences like that. This was all on my own. And there were people who influenced my journey along the way, for sure. But nobody like cajoled me into anything. I just came to these realizations on my own. And then I decided, after a big crisis I had in 2016, where I almost lost all my company and everything. And interestingly, you know, luckily I'm a Taurus. So Taurus is sort of blessed with the luck. And now I realize it really is just kind of like luck. Right. It's not like I used to think, no, I make my own luck. You know, luck is where opportunity meets preparation. You know, I'd have all these statements and I could give, you know, a great speech on how to manifest. Right. And I still can. But now I realize that maybe it wasn't all my willpower all along. In fact, maybe none of it was my willpower, and maybe all of it was just my life path and the numbers somehow I selected. Who knows? And so I started thinking differently about all the things that I had so-called achieved, right? And I had many accolades. You know, I set up the Chamber of Commerce in Orange County. You know, now it has several hundred members. I was all the things. I gave a speech at a university in 2011. It was 150th anniversary for Chapman University, and I gave their commencement speech. And you know, I got recognized at UCI, University of California, Irvine, for being an engineer of the future. You know, I've gotten all these accolades and awards, but the thing that was missing is I didn't know myself. I didn't accept myself. That's why I kept going harder and harder and harder to somehow, with each new accomplishment, be good enough. And, you know, I part of it, I don't blame any of it, because this is the life path I chose. Now I understand this. But, you know, my mother was not exactly easy. She was very much considered like a tiger mom, right? And she said to me, oh, you got all A's and 1 A minus. And next time, if you get all A's, then I'll really love you.
Why no A pluses? I mean, honestly.
Exactly. Well, there were no A pluses back then. Yeah. You know, we didn't have like this stuff that they have now with, you know, the AP courses and all this stuff where you can get more than a 4.0. But the thing is, and believe me, if we did, then that would have been the case. You need all A pluses. But the point is that it was a journey of self-discovery, and that journey was a journey of love, to understand who I was and to be accepting of who that person is. Because what I also learned is that through geometry, there's a mirror, right? Literally a 1/x mirror in the world around us. And everything that we judge in this world comes back to us in everything we attract. So we will continue to attract everything we judge until we no longer judge everything we attract.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Yeah. And this is a very rich conversation, Robert. I'm loving what you're sharing here. So thank you so much, because this is kind of speaking to the heart of my love affair with geometry as well, that I've had, like, that's been the richest experience of it, that it's shown me. And sometimes it's hard to really let it all come up, who I really am, warts and all, and to be able to allow the channel get clear. I've had to let all the debris and all the bits of me that I've tried to disown, to be honest, comes up into consciousness, but somehow it's been very, very clearing, and somehow, I don't know why, but geometry is this very, very potent vehicle for this coming home to who we are at our deepest level, and this is wonderful that we've got here in our conversation today, because the other thing is it's a solo journey. There's not very many workshops you can do on this one. It's like I started drawing like simple triangles and squares one time, and I was on a trip around Italy. Then I drew a pentagram, and I made a mandala out of it. And I started seeing all the golden ratio and all the architecture, and I literally, it's like I had golden ratio eyes all of a sudden. I couldn't look out my eyeballs without seeing the golden ratio everywhere, and none of my peer group could relate to what I was saying. They just thought I was cracked, and so you have to carry a lot of this on your own, and I was like, I'm trusting myself with this because this feels more real than anything I've ever felt. And I'm, maybe I'm not going to get the response I'm looking for from my peer group, but I'm going to trust myself with this, And I think when you do that with geometry, it really takes you places. I was joking a little bit there when I was speaking about, the platonic solids, and I was adding them up. And it is true, if you add up the 4 earthly elements of the platonic solids, you get 7920. And if you add up, I was just playing around in my head on this plane flight to London one time.
The diameter of Earth in miles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I kind of knew that. I said, that's kind of cool. So we're on planet Earth. And if you add up the 4 earthly elements, you get the diameter of the planet we're on. I kind of digged that, right? And then I was like, I just said, oh, but if you add the dodecahedron, which represents the ether, which is like, what's the ether? It's kind of invisible, elusive, the invisible glue of the universe that binds it all together, or something like that. I don't know. And then the most ethereal of the elements is air, and you add the dodecahedron and the octahedron, you also get 7920. And I was on this kind of trip of, that's really cool. It's like 2 ways of being on planet Earth at the same time. We have our kind of earthly selves, the kind of square self. We have this more kind of like elusive, ethereal, maybe spiritual side of who we are.
Irrational.
Both here right now. Yeah. Both here right now.
Okay? We have the red pill and the blue pill, both.
Yeah, exactly. But this gets really cool, and it's loaded with a question for you, Robert, at the end of this trip, right? So I was also, and this will show you what a nerd I am, by the way, as well. Just I'm disclosing some of myself. So I was kind of joking around saying, I don't know in America if you have the game Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. It's this kind of game show on television, and they ask you questions. Well, I was kind of fantasizing that I was on this show and I had the last question to be a millionaire. And it said, "Dear Geoff, can you recite the golden ratio to 13 digits?" And I was shocked to discover I couldn't, right? I didn't know the golden ratio. So I started Googling it. I started learning off the golden ratio to 13 digits like a nerd. And at the same time, I was running the platonic solids, okay? I get to London, I check into my hotel, and I just go and I say, okay, right, Geoff, enough of the nerding off now. Let's get about our business. I had stuff to do in London. I walk out the door and I go down to this dentist. It's called a Kensington dentist, right? And the logo in the window is a dodecahedron with the golden ratio symbol in the middle of it, right? And like, I cannot tell you how unbelievably potent this coincidence or synchronicity was for me. Because like, and I know that you've had these too. I absolutely imagine you have. But when you get hit with one of these, you're thinking something, you're thinking about concepts, you're running these principles in your consciousness. And then outside of yourself in the external reality, you literally get an undeniable endorsement that there's some kind of reflexive communication going on behind the scenes, And like, I could have stayed in any hotel and anywhere in London. I just went to booking.com or whatever, all the things that had to line up for me to run those thoughts in my head that morning, for me to see. And I've never seen that composition of a dodecahedron with the golden ratio, you know, the phi symbol in the middle of it. And so what, and I know Scott has had the same, these coincidences that begin when we're in that flow state with geometry, and we begin to really vibe on an idea and something's really just joining up for us. Have you found that coincidences get amplified for you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think I'm down to probably maybe one every minute now.
But isn't this a big part of the trip where it becomes very, very,
oh yeah,
some people say unsettling. I actually love it, but please, I'd love
you start
to hear.
realizing that the entire universe, once you realize that the entire universe is built on number and that the entire universe is a form of communication, right? The expression is a communication. It's a language, right? What is it that the world around us is trying to express to us and communicate back to us? And what it always is, invariably, and I highly recommend listening to Alan Watts videos. He's like amazing at this. But what it always is more to learn about yourself. That the great journey in life is not an external one, it's actually an inward one. When you start realizing the world around you is just the projection of what's inside of you. It is the sum total of all of your judgments. It is the sum total of all of your observations. And in that context, it's very easy to become a hammer that's always looking for nails. Right? And we don't even realize that the thing that we're searching for becomes the most elusive thing to us. Right? Until we actually feel like we have it all already, what we believe we lack, we will only ever lack more of. It is what it is. And so it kind of cracks me up, because I thought, geez, I was living my whole life like thinking I need this, I need that, and this. And then all of a sudden, I'm learning by experience over and over and over again that the thing that I need to learn gets expressed to me in opposite terms. So put that in brass tacks. If I came here to learn unconditional love, and I'm basically judging the lack of unconditional love in the world around me, what I'm going to experience by my own attraction is betrayal, because betrayal is unconditional love in its opposite form. It's conditional love. So I experienced that, right? And I needed to understand the mathematics of that. Every action must have an equal opposite reaction. Just like the grace equation, right? There's got to be this relationship of whatever happens to you. And then you finally realize, when you can finally interpolate the communications coming back to you, the things that we're supposed to learn to break out of samsara, right? To break out of this consciousness of separation. The things we're supposed to learn are actually coming to us in the opposite sense. Then we start to feel like the universe isn't happening to me, but rather it's happening for me. It's happening for my advancement, for my understanding. So even when bad things, quote unquote, happen, instead of asking, why did that person do this to me? I tend now to look within. Why did I want to experience this? What is it that my higher self is trying to tell me about my life experience? And it's not looking to blame anyone outside. So people that say that they are woke in today's, woke society and social justice society, I've got bad news. The bad news I have for the social justice, and it's not even bad news for them, because they're just reflections of what's inside of me, my observation of it, at least, right? Is that anyone who is actually awakened is not judgmental. And people that are truly awakened realize that the more they judge something, the more they will only manifest the thing that they judge. So the things you don't like about the world around you, instead of looking around you, because actually what the universe does is it throws back at us everything that we are that we simply cannot see.
Wow.
This is what the term narcissistic self-projection comes from, right? We have a saying in our company here: if you spot it, that means you got it. The thing that you judge in someone else is the thing that you actually are doing to other people, and you're simply not aware of it.
Wow. Beautiful. So can I ask as well, just to thicken the plot here a little bit, because I'm deeply fascinated with coincidences, these are coincidences that touch your soul, right? It's not kind of like, I was thinking of a red car and I saw a red car. Sometimes it is just like a happen chance, But when I had that experience with thinking about the Platonic solids all morning, thinking about the golden ratio, and then seeing it on that window, it really landed somewhere very, very significant where I felt a presence communicating with me, And to be honest, I liked your question here, because you sort of go for what is the learning in this experience for me? And I tried to ask myself that question, and I didn't really get a clear answer, apart from a sense of a maybe like an acknowledgement or an endorsement or some kind of like, right, Geoff, you're right on track, stay with it, you're doing good. There was a sense of some kind of endorsement, and I didn't get anything more from it than that. But I'd love to, and Scott as well, I'd love to ask you too. I think there's more in these coincidences, that as we get into geometry and these coincidences get amplified, that it's part of this language that we're communicating with. But I personally, I'm only at the very baby stages of trying to really interact with these coincidences in a way that I can kind of advance my learning from them, or do you think they're more, maybe, perhaps, than just a endorsement of like being on the right track, for example? Do you think we could evolve how we mine the gold from these coincidences? Or maybe we don't need to do that. Maybe we just celebrate them as a beautiful, gift, and that's enough, perhaps. I don't know.
I think that can you hold on one second?
Yeah, sure.
Hello?
Geoff, I see it as a messaging system from a higher self. These synchronicities and coincidences that happen. They're like, you're getting the confirmation. But I think it's a very slow means of communication. And if you develop more like extrasensory perception or intuition, then there's less need to message you through the world, because you get it directly in your gut or in a feeling, But it is kind of a beautiful thing to see your inner thought process mirrored in the world. And you can say, hey, did you see that? Look at that. Like, that's verifiable. It's verifiable in a sense, but how do we know what you were thinking? We can't verify that part.
Yes, only you can verify that part. And that's why often they're so deeply personal, aren't they? So people go like, oh, there's Geoff going on again, about.
No, I had an experience just like that last night, where, I was kind of mind blown, because I've been doing a lot of work on squaring the circle, a lot. And I published on my website the method to square the circle through compass and straight edge construction. And so you can see it, right? You can watch the video of how to do it. And there's one part that is so critically important to this. And I derived this from Leonardo da Vinci's work. So most people don't know the Euler number, which is 2.718. It's a transcendental irrational number. It's equally important to pi, but most people don't even know what Euler number is. Now, interestingly, the word Euler, right? And by the way, it wasn't Euler who discovered the Euler number. Euler number basically controls and governs all expansion, exponentiation, and growth, right? So if there's a speed limit for the light speed of the universe, then the speed limit of the speed limit is going to be the Euler number, right? It's that fundamental. It determines compound interest, right? So you put $1 in, if we compounded the interest and we kept compounding it even minute by minute, the maximum that it'll ever get to is 2.718281828, right? That's all it is. Maybe I know 13 digits of that.
Did you know that when Google had their IPO?
You'd be good on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
When Google had their IPO, they did it for $1 billion.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Wait, let me see if I know phi. Wait, it's 1.618033988749895. That's 16
Oh my
digits.
God. $1
Wow.
million to Robert. You're the winner. Yeah. That's impressive. That's impressive.
I think you got 3 or 4 more digits than I remember. So
So
That's good.
but the point is, though, the point is that, you know, the Euler number is embedded. It was supposed to have been discovered by Isaac Newton, or maybe Charles Napier. You know, Newton kind of takes a bad rap for stealing things, like, you know, from Leibniz and calculus and everything. Calculus is an abomination, by the way. It's totally an abomination. I think it's a made up mathematics, but that's a whole nother discussion. That's why it's not beautiful and simple. We can do everything with trigonometry when we fully understand trigonometry. Trig is magnifique, right? It's like incredible. But
it's all based on the circle, the trig.
yeah, it's all based on the circle and quadrants of the circle.
Yeah.
And
it's a philosophy of unity because
it's
of
a
the
philosophy of unity through quaternity, right? It's like fourfold mirror symmetry. And so basically what you know, I had noticed was that what Da Vinci encrypted in the Vitruvian Man, the famous, you know, sketch that was like a loose leaf sketch, and it sits today in Venice in a museum, was not even close to squaring the circle. Now, Da Vinci studied the topic of squaring the circle, according to Walter Isaacson. I read his book on, you know, the biography on Leonardo da Vinci's life. And what he basically says is Da Vinci spent 10 years perfecting squaring of the circle.
But it
Now,
wasn't a
how is
mistake. The way he did it was not.
Yeah, it's so off, right? It's so off from how everyone else was looking at the world. They're looking at, okay, how do you get either an area or a perimeter matching the circumference of a circle, or the area of the square matching the area of a circle. And those are the two ways to square the circle. And he did neither. He did something kind of right in between. And the thing that he did in between was genius. And what nobody understood about it, and what I had found, was that actually the area of the square Da Vinci placed is the Euler number when the circle is pi.
Wow, really?
This was hundreds of years before Napier or Isaac Newton purportedly discovered the Euler number. And there is something fundamental to the relationship of Euler over pi. And it connects back to 432 and the fine structure constant of 137 and the golden angle 137.5. Because basically the relationship between the two, Euler to the power of pi, the inverse of Euler to the power of pi equals 1 over 0.0432. So Euler to the power of pi is 23.148. Well, 1 over 23.148 is 432. That's the Tetractys number. And what is the diameter of a circle with circumference of 432? 137.5, the golden angle. Okay, so he embedded it. And by the way, he put all of this in his document, because the way I discovered it was I found that the unit of measure that was used at the time of Da Vinci's life was still the inch, right, and the foot. They also used palms, and there are other measurements, but it was no coincidence that Da Vinci made the diameter of the Vitruvian Man circle exactly 4.3262798 inches. And why is that number important? Well, when you double it, it's 8.65255 inches. And that, by the way, is the exact ratio between Euler and pi. Euler over pi equals 0.865255. Now, these numbers are really close to the diameter of the sun, right? 864,000 miles. It's actually got 865,000 miles. And if you look at the sun hidden in plain sight, would it surprise you to know that the circumference of the sun is the Euler number in miles?
Yeah, I know that. I made a graphic about that a long time ago, but it's also the E and pi and phi are all encoded in the Great Pyramid.
They're all encoded in the Great Pyramid. So who did the encoding, right? Was it people who consciously did it, or was it just part of consciousness as expression? Are we all just an expression of that consciousness, right? That's the question.
I think it goes, the understanding for this naturally tends to go through stages. And I actually memorialized that on the cover of my anthology. and I used an old cosmonaut poster at CCCP, and I used it as conspiracy, coincidence, consciousness, and providence.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's
so
what
I
that
think
means. I never knew that.
yeah. So you start
CCCP
with
is, oh, beautiful,
with
Scott.
conspiracy. At first, you think, oh, it's
Isn't
all a
that the Soviet
conspiracy.
Union's old acronym?
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So I hope that people aren't offended by me using this kind of evil empires acronym, but I'm repurposing it
Mhm.
in a new way. And it kind of mirrors the journey that I took, and probably you may have taken, Robert and Geoff, in terms of starting out by thinking it's all a conspiracy. There must be Freemasons, for example,
Who know all of this.
somebody
Mhm.
who knows all of this, and and then you start to look deeper, maybe, and you see there's all these coincidences that seem to happen, and then you start wondering, okay, maybe it's all related to consciousness. Maybe that's a deeper level of explaining all of this, and I use providence primarily because of the acronym, but it's kind of like there's a fortuitous, beautiful, positive nature to the universe that underpins all of this, that guides us in our individual paths in a helpful way. And I find that it's kind of an expansion of your boundary to go through these stages individually. To start out with thinking it's all an evil human conspiracy is a natural first step, but then going beyond that and starting to realize, well, the size of the moon and the earth are expressed by squaring the circle, and the golden ratio is embedded in that, and the Great Pyramid encodes that, and that couldn't have been a conspiracy because it deals with the size of our moon.
Yeah.
Or the movement of Mars around our planet,
Yeah, and you keep going and you realize that it's so much vaster than
So much bigger.
than a conspiracy would encompass. And then you go beyond, and it's kind of like this process of continually blowing through your boundaries and continually blowing your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And so that's where I came to when I went through this whole process, and to decrypt the work of Leonardo. And maybe it wasn't even the work of Leonardo, it was just the work of consciousness. Because
that's working through him. He was a wonderful instrument of higher intelligence. And I think we could speculate whether how much of that was he aware of consciously, and how much of that was he merely the instrument that wrote it down.
let me give you an example. If I go back to 2014, I was drawing circles and squares without even knowing anything about Vitruvian Man other than that it existed. I was drawing circles and squares with the proportions of 432 and 1000 and 864, and basically describing it. In fact, you could see that I didn't have a compass then. I didn't even have a compass. I just kept seeing 864, 432, and the diameter was 137 and a half. And I was like, why do I keep seeing this? And I wrote it in my notes, and now it's in one of my books that's available. But I wrote in one of my notes, which is, I think there's something fundamental to Euler over pi. And then that exact relationship 6 years later shows up in the analysis I did of Vitruvian Man, and that the area of the Vitruvian Man square is the Euler number. It's not even close to pi. It's 0.865255. It's not 1, right? And so people that were in the art historian world would not even know to make that connection. It's like they just thought, oh, he was making it, and yet it's still beautiful, right? That somehow you look at that, and the way by placing the square at the base of the circle, it has this beautiful aspect to it. So what I then started to embark upon was, okay, how could I recreate this transcendental and rational number, both of them in this relationship with each other, without any measurement whatsoever? And what I found is that the solution is very possible. All you have to do is you draw a circle, any size circle, it doesn't matter, and then exoscribe a square, which there's a construction that can be done, right, using geometric principle and the ancient method, right, without any measurement whatsoever. You just take your compass at the 4 points of the cross across a circle, and then you can make the intersection of the corners of the square just by taking your compass and drawing another line outside of it to the upper right, and then doing it from the top middle of the circle and the bottom base, middle of the base, et cetera, doing the same thing. So you exoscribe a square around it, and then you put a crisscross, connect the corners of the square across the circle, right? And then where you place, and this is the most important thing, you take the top of the middle of the circle, and you're going to combine the circle with the square. Now, where is that connection point? It's a triangle, right? So you take the top of that circle, the middle of it, and where you see the X that's going across the circle, where it intersects the circle, instead of placing it, you put your ruler off to the left of something so you have enough space to draw your line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of doing that, this is what you have to do. And this is a right brain exercise because it requires heart and artistry from the heart to be able to square the circle. Even if you know the method, doing it perfect is hard. And I do it as a meditative practice now. Like literally, that's what I'll do. I'll just sit down and practice drawing, squaring of the circle, and try to get more and more perfect. And I end up, taking a scanned image of it and then measuring it versus an overlay I have in GeoGebra, which I can then see, okay, yes, it was a perfect match or not, right? And because you could do that on GeoGebra, you got 17 digits of accuracy, right? We're talking about the size of one hydrogen atom, okay? 17, it's like even smaller because that would only be 10 to the negative 15th. But basically what you're looking at here is when you place that ruler at the intersection point of the circle, the feminine, right? Down, and you bring the line past the circle and you put it exactly, not giving yourself any space, so that intersection occurs just before the circle intersects the line from the square.
Mm-hmm.
Then
I'm with you.
That will bring it all the way down to the base of the square that you already have. And
Mm-hmm.
then you take your compass, you measure that length, you flip it around, you got the other side now perfectly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that gives you the base of the Euler square. Gives you the base of the Euler square. And now because you've got the exoscribed square around it, you just take a line from the upper left corner down to the center base, and the upper right corner as diagonals down to the center base, and all squares that would be oriented around the base of the circle must have a line on those corners. Their corners must line up with those two diagonal lines, right?
Beautiful.
Always. So then all you have to do is you've got the base defined, you swing your compass around and it will intersect those diagonal lines on both sides. And where it intersects, you then draw your square, you have an Euler squaring of the circle. So Euler in German, though, here's another little mind trick for everybody. The word Euler, I speak German, I speak 8 languages, and that also helped my math endeavor, right? Because that was another form of pattern recognition. I've lived in 9 countries. But basically what I'd always kind of been amazed about was I was like, oh, the word Euler means owl. Now, is it a coincidence that an owl is the one, bird that can rotate its head 271.8 degrees?
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. Oh my God, that's cool.
So wait a minute.
Coincidence.
The name Euler, that's a little coincidence, right? The name Euler, now you look up most places, you'll find, you have to get into really scientific literature to find this. It just goes past 270 degrees. So, the botanists and the people that are studying zoology are just say, oh, 270 degrees. But the name Euler means owl.
Three quarters of a circle, everyone.
3/4 of a circle, right? The name Euler means owl, and it means wisdom. It references wisdom, right? There is a wisdom associated with this, and it's a beautiful wisdom. And from that, by having, and I call this the Da Vinci construction box, the Vitruvian Man gives us a model for a new construction. You've heard of phi construction boxes, right? We got a lot of sacred geometry people on here. So you can create, using ancient Greek methodology, a phi construction box, and then use that as your measurement tool without using measurement, right? So the way you do that is you make the phi relationship. So you've got a square, you pull it around and then bring it down. So you've got that, that relationship to the square root of 5. that shows up. Now you've got a line that's exactly 1.618 versus 1.
And square root of phi is like 4 over pi.
Yes, well, sorry, what I meant to say is square root of 5, but yes, that's right. So square root of phi is definitely related to 4 over pi, no doubt about that. There's a very slight difference, right? 4 over pi is 1.273, which is what, comes out to be a reference to the moon, right? 27.3. And then the square root of phi comes out to 1.272. And then there's another number that relates to the Great Pyramid that sits right smack dab in the middle of those two. It's actually a 45% ratio between the two, and that's 14 over 11. And that's what the Great Pyramid ratio actually is. 14 over 11. It's 1.272727 repeating. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that now from this, by knowing the construction box, the Da Vinci construction box, you can now solve 2 of the impossible problems. You can now draw a perfect pi. Once you've perfectly, circumnavigated the challenge of Euler, you can now draw a perfect squaring of the circle where a square will match the area of the circle. Exactly. And there's a form for it. I won't go through it here, but that you can follow, and it works. It absolutely works.
That's
Then
amazing.
secondly,
is that on your website, Robert, by the way?
It is. It's on my website.
Diagram.
It's on my
That's
website.
really helpful. That's
The
really
other thing you
helpful.
can do is that using the ancient problem of doubling the cube was also another one of the 3 impossible problems, right?
Yes.
The 3 impossible problems. So the cube of Delos is a problem. How can you have an exact length, because it's irrational, and we're not supposed to be able to construct irrational lines, right, without measurement, right, or using noesis or other methods, right, to be able to achieve it. But actually it's inside the Da Vinci construction box, because if you take the center of the circle and then draw a line diagonal up to the upper right corner of the square that Da Vinci left. So now I showed you the method, or I just described it to you anyway, how you could have the method of drawing the Euler square versus the pi circle, right? If you draw from the center of the circle to the upper right corner of the square Da Vinci left in his construction box, that turns out to be exactly the cube root of 2, which is the solution to solving the doubling of the cube.
That's an elegant way to get it. I know Isaac Newton devised a method that I covered in my constructions course using noesis, or it's also known as the marked ruler technique, but it requires that you use measurement.
Yeah, the noesis, that's what I was referencing, and it's a measurement. I don't do this with any measurement at all, and it comes out perfect. So basically, if you take the base of the square of Da Vinci's, Euler value, the owl, right? The wisdom of the owl. You take the base of the square and you take half of that value and make that 1. Then from the center of the circle to the upper corner of the square in a diagonal will be exactly 1.25922, whatever. It's
Is that the cube root of 2?
Yep, it's exactly the cube root of 2. So now you can actually construct, and I've got on my website and showed in the video as well, how to do it. And then, so that's the second problem. So squaring the circle, the cube root of 2, and solving the cube of Delos problem, how to double a cube, supposed to be impossible. And squaring the circle is supposed to be impossible. Gauss, mainly Wansel, Pierre Wansel, a French mathematician, purportedly proved it's impossible to square the circle. So there used to be competitions on squaring the circle all the time. Now there's no more competitions because this guy said, no, it's not true. And in this case, the squeaky wheel got the most oil, right? And that's all it was, is he just said, no, it's impossible, and everyone gave up on it.
Well, I think it was Lindemann who discovered or proved in the 19th century that squaring the circle was impossible because of the transcendental nature of pi. But it's part of the human soul to try to reconcile opposites. And Geoff and I did this whole squaring the circle workshop and intensive, and we delved deeply into this archetype. And even though it's, quote, impossible, and you seem to have found a way to make it possible.
It's totally possible. I can tell you it's 1000% possible. And Wansel went on, and so did Lindemann. Lindemann, absolutely. I think it was 1888 that he wrote the paper on the impossibility of squaring the circle. but I can tell you it is absolutely, maybe it was 1882. It's absolutely possible.
But are you finding an exact geometric solution or one that's just very, very
exact?
Good? Wow.
Exact.
Yeah.
Exact geometric solution to 17 decimal digits of accuracy.
In GeoGebra, you're
in GeoGebra.
there. Yeah.
Yep.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mhm.
I mean,
Absolutely.
and this is satisfying because we all want to square the circle. We want to reconcile heaven and earth. We want to bring the finite together with the infinite. You know, we have this tension in our souls that we want to reconcile, and it's not helpful that someone says, well, that you can't do that. That's impossible.
No, it is
Yeah.
absolutely possible. It's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah.
And it requires art, right? It requires a lot of art and art
Incredible.
history to do it. It's not something that you can just follow the method for and perfect. It's a heart exercise more than a brain exercise once you understand the method. But I do videotape it so you can see it. But what's interesting also is that using the Da Vinci construction box, you can solve the other things that Wansell proved were impossible, which were drawing, prime numbers as polygons. So inside the construction box, the ratios and relationships of that construction box, of that Euler square and that pi circle, give you the solution to solving how to draw without construction measurement, the heptagon, the nonagon, the hendecagon, right? The tridecagon, all of them, all the way, I did all of them all the way up to the number 23, right? And perfectly, without any measurement.
Out of that diagram.
They all
perfectly.
fall out of the Vitruvian man relationship of an Euler square and a pi circle.
This blows my mind, to be honest, because I mean, that diagram is so rich, and I never knew that there was a kind of a guidance to draw the polygons geometrically,
This is the 5D construction box. The 5D construction box is what Da Vinci left in the Vitruvian man's proportions. That's the 5D construction box.
Robert, I want to do a workshop with you on this because we should all do one together,
I'd love to.
Because this would be amazing to teach people how to generate all of these polygons coming out of the Vitruvian man. I mean, the Vitruvian man is the most iconic depiction of the human body ever made. And I've done a rendition of it where I put half of a female anatomy and half of a male anatomy on there, because I feel that it's really representing the human condition.
I'd love to see that. That's cool.
It's kind of inappropriate now.
It's not, yeah, it's
just male.
The whole point is to see that the woman is there. And that's actually what I wanted to show you guys. And I can actually go a little bit longer